Hello. Today in Social Psychology of Leisure, this week we're really looking at the impacts of leisure experiences. And this is a quote in the 70s, actually, well, just before I was born, from the World Leisure and Recreation Association, um, in a statement about the importance of leisure and recreation. But this still holds true. People cannot grow on the basis of physical sustenance alone. They need a cultural identity, a sense of social fulfillment, a regeneration of body and spirit, which comes from various forms of recreation and leisure and makes their role one of growing importance on the world agenda. So, for this unit, we're going to be just discussing a whole bunch of different theories. And these then are all theories that are, related to primarily social and psychological outcomes and the role of leisure in them. So, really, for this unit, what you need to understand is for every one of these theories, you need to know what the theory states, like what's it about, and then, secondly, you need to know the role and impact of leisure according to that theory. So, the first theory is, if you can even really call it a theory or just a premise, is the pleasure, fun, relaxation types of theories. So, a couple of terms. Pleasure is a feeling of contentment that results from one's various needs are satisfied and expectations are met. But pleasure, see, it's a feeling of contentment. It's not quite the same as enjoyment. Enjoyment is experiences that are not only pleasurable, but that have a feeling of increased competence and growth. So it is even beyond pleasurable. And then there's hedonism. So the hedonism comes a lot from, Greek and Roman times, and it's really looking at that. We often participate in hedonic behaviors, and that's just like, um, you know, gluttony or just things for the pure pleasure of it. So hedonism is really then a theory that's stating that people act in such a way as to seek pleasure and avoid pain. That is what humans do. And sometimes we indulge too much in things that we find pleasurable. So these theories then are simply that people identify that pleasure, relaxation, and fun are an important criteria of leisure experiences. So this theory is really talking about the pleasure principle. Fairly straightforward. People seek pleasure, and therefore pleasure seeking is important to understand people's behavior. Assuming we are we have drives and motives, obviously, for pleasure. So the role and impact of leisure in these sort of groupings of theories is simply that people seek fun or pleasurable experiences in their leisure. It's also important to note that brief, pleasurable experiences enhance quality of life and enhance long-term psychological well-being. Research shows that how many pleasurable, like brief pleasurable moments we have is actually more important to our psychological well-being than if we had, um, you know, hardly any pleasurable moments followed by something that was, let's say, a week-long pleasurable moment. For example, relating this to vacations and breaks. This would suggest that for our psychological well being, it is better to have leisure frequently, each week, or even having making sure you're taking a full day off work or the weekend, than working constantly and then only having, a week long vacation. So, leisure is very important to our well-being, and having some form of enjoyment or pleasure daily is important to us. And obviously, this can influence our health, because our moods are directly related, often even to our physical beings as well. And obviously, it enhances well-being by promoting positive moods. So again, these types of theories are really just about seeking pleasure and fun, and then that's good for our health and our mood and our, enhancing well-being, having these pleasurable moments. The next theory is sort of distraction, keeping idle hands busy theory. You may not have heard of, there's a proverb from the Bible, idle hands is the devil's advocate. And these sort of theories are kind of coming from that philosophy. So the theory is stating that people are happiest mentally healthy when they are busy. That if you have too much time on your hands, it's not good for you. That unoccupied time is psychologically and behaviorally risky. When we are idle, when we are not occupied, the theory is stating that this can result in boredom and also can result in participation in destructive activities like drug and alcohol abuse, crime and vandalism as leisure, or unhealthy leisure activities too, like, for example, gambling. There have probably been, for example, during COVID, maybe there people had boredom and maybe participating in things like more online gambling and that type of activities. And this theory then, as I kind of suggested, it comes from the philosophy was called the Protestant work ethic. And that's really sort of historical when North America was primarily colonized by Protestants, and many of them, obviously, when they came, for example, to Canada, you had to toil this land. It was a terrible, harsh environment to live in. So they didn't want people to be, just having leisure. It was it's about being productive for survival, of the community. Um, and so, for example, they even had laws at the time about when you could have leisure or not. I mean, that's how we got the day of rest for Sundays, not just from the Bible, but it was actually part of most laws in communities. You weren't allowed to work on Sundays. Why? In order to have some recreation. But they didn't want people having too much. You shouldn't be uh, too having too much idle hands. Now, there isn't a lot of research to test this theory, but we do know there's been a lot of applied research when it comes to teenagers. For example, we know teens who are bored with their leisure are more likely to engage in risky health behaviors like smoking, alcohol abuse, bulimia. Also, suicide is also increased from boredom. So according to this theory, then it's not a leap that obviously the role and impact of leisure then is to keep us occupied. So leisure keeps people with too much free time on their hands, idle hands, occupied, to keep us psychologically well. And, a lot of people, for example, you might be thinking of when you have boredom, if you have hobbies that you can do and this sort of thing. And, even you think about this with kids. If my kids have the feeling of boredom, even though there might be many things they can do in their environment, uh, that's when they usually get up to trouble. And, things crash or there's big messes or, they're arguing. So, um, it is important to have some structure and keeping people somewhat occupied. And, this is also with older adults as well, giving people things to do to occupy themselves. But this can also, the theory is suggesting then that leisure also protects people psychologically, like from boredom, and then thus from negative and destructive behaviors. And this theory then is really how we got things like after school programs. Even the YMCA historically was developed because in the 1800s, they viewed that youth were not engaging in good behavior, that they were drinking, having, boxing fights in the streets and such things. So they were trying to provide youth with social and physical means of occupying themselves and also, developing themselves. Now we have after school programs, clubs. A lot of this has to do the premise that if children and youth are engaged in some sort of good behavior, then they will not be engaged in negative. And I would say there's some truth to this, even though, it's somewhat hard to study. We then have personal growth theories. So these theories are really about people being the best you can be. And so it's really like that leisure pursuits that are enjoyable and personally meaningful are important to people and provide psychological benefits. So these activities then isn't just any leisure activity, but it's one that is enjoyable and meaningful and has benefits. So it's not just that these are pleasurable, but these activities result in increased competence, self-efficacy, control, and growth, self-determination. Now, one of the things with this theory, it suggests too that people must meet most of their needs and also be reasonably satisfied with their lives before they can experience personal growth. So the theory is suggesting then that people seek self-esteem, that we seek self-actualization, that we want to grow and develop as individuals. So self-actualization, by definition, is the process of developing one's true potential as individuals to the fullest extent and expressing one's skills, talents, and emotions in a personally fulfilling way. This is obviously very related then to self-determination because it's really then, these activities that provide for personal growth are usually leisure activities that meet the needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So what is the role and impact of leisure then for personal growth? Well, leisure provides opportunities for people to become the person they would like to be. You can use your leisure and recreation to develop skills and attributes or even images, identity of who you would like to be. You develop skills and abilities then that not are only important in the leisure and recreation context, but as we've talked about throughout this course, they're also used in professionalization or in your work or school or even family, social. The skills and abilities you gain in leisure and recreation are transferred to other areas of life. And also, leisure provides usually a lot of immediate feedback. So, leisure helps us to develop a clear idea of strengths and weaknesses. It's in your leisure that you often discover things about yourself, that you are maybe um, nervous at public speaking, or that actually you're very good at planning social events, or you're good at doing icebreakers, or you're good at teaching skills. These are things that we often find out in our recreation and leisure activities. So people who experience then higher levels of well-being and satisfaction are more involved in freely chosen activities that challenge their knowledge and skills. And these activities also need to require an investment of effort. So it's about commitment, serious leisure, and flow. So what this theory is saying then, it's not just any leisure activity that provides for personal growth. It's activities that a person has to really invest their time, their development in terms of skills. And so it's really the more you put into an activity or into investing in an experience, the more you're going to get out of that. And through that, then you develop knowledge and skills and, personal growth. The fourth theory is identity formation. So this is really then about leisure helping us to develop and showcase our identity. So people have a self-awareness and of how others might view them. So people create images of themselves in response to their own behaviors and the actions of others. And this is really what this is as identity formation. So we often then select images of what we want people to see us as. So identity formation is the extent that these images form a somewhat consistent and stable picture of a person. We want the messages of how we view ourselves and the images that we portray to others to be consistent. So we want it to be a stable picture of who we are, about how we see ourselves, and how others perceive us. So the theory then is suggesting that we use leisure activities as ways of expressing our identity. So in leisure, people are free to be themselves and also try out new possibilities, different roles, different identities. Think of being a teenager. It's often when you in clubs and sports that you kind of pushed yourself to try different things or dress a certain way or act a certain way, kind of putting on different hats and roles. But it's also a liberating context of leisure that you can really try on identity alternatives and figure out different expressions of personal interests in your leisure. But leisure activities really reflect often the essence of an individual's identity. They are an expression of our interests, of our inclinations, and identification. Some people even have leisure activities that they do that they don't want people to know they do because of the identity image that it gives. So, and we also know that leisure activities also contribute to our identity formation. The things that we do in life tell us who we are. And so that makes us view ourselves in a certain way. And also, it's a reciprocal relationship. So the role of leisure in identity formation and reflection is particularly important in adolescence, obviously, because that's when we're often testing on these different identities, figuring out who we are. The theory also suggests that leisure activities that are challenging, again, activities that require more investment, that are more serious in nature, that have stages of development, that these more challenging activities activities that are more likely to produce flow are more likely to contribute to our identity formation. So if things are challenging in terms of knowledge and skills and have investment, they're more likely to reflect our identity and also help us to form the identity of ourselves. And you can think about in these pictures, what is the identity image of these activities? When I was in high school, I went to a high school with approximately 2,000 students, and we had 5 grades then. I was still part of grade 13. There was still grade 13 for a while after I finished high school. But these, in Ontario, I should point out, when when I think about high school, I can think about how most of our identity images were really about recreation and leisure activities. You can think about the identity image of a person playing guitar, that they're artistic, that they, well, for me, it was always like they were kind of a hippie or something, especially if it was a classical guitar. But even the type of guitar even reflects your identity. Or think of volleyball. When someone says, I'm a volleyball player, there's a certain image that you have associated with them. And even within volleyball culture, my husband was a volleyball player. There is, a difference in identity even between indoor court volleyball versus beach volleyball. You can think of when someone says that they're really an outdoors person and like kayaking and camping, you have a certain picture of even the clothes that they might wear. Think of even Dr. Loeffler. You can see from her how she dresses, the types of activities that she's interested in. Outdoor recreation, outdoor education is her identity. I have here, we often have stereotypes of these identity images, like I'm chess playing. And, this can also prevent us from participating in things, especially in adolescence. As an example, when I entered grade 9, there was many different clubs and sports and such that you could join in. And my mother, she really, really wanted me to join the chess club in high school in grade 9. And I was trying to explain to her that I could not. Now, I really actually liked playing chess. My dad and I would play, played with a couple of cousins. Not something I did all the time, but, I always enjoyed playing chess and still do. But I refused. I told my mother flat out, no way am I joining that club. And it was because of the identity image, because I thought it would make me look like, think I'd be nerdy. So again, sometimes you might miss out on opportunities because of the image that you think it portrays. And this is especially with teenagers. They will refuse to do things because of the identity image of the activity. So that can be a barrier. Leisure identities then can become highly salient. Salient means significant to self-concept for 3 reasons. One is that identities express and affirm individual talents and capabilities. So when we are good at a leisure or recreation activity, it affirms that what we're good at. It also allows us to express what we're good at. For example, I am an athlete or I am an artist. It also provides a degree of social recognition. Being good at an activity provides you with some social status. Being a varsity athlete or being engaged in the local theater production or being an excellent gardener. These things might provide you with recognition. And these leisure identities also affirm our central values and interests. So it's not just about expressing, but it's about validating to ourselves what we care about and what we find important. So, the role and impact of leisure then on identity formation is people will choose to participate in leisure activities in part because of the identity images associated with them. And again, I guess this could be good or bad or have positive or negative outcomes. Different leisure activities have distinct and measurable identity images. Society often shares these beliefs or even stereotypes about the characteristics of the people. When I say chess club player, or that someone is a snowboarder, or that someone is a painter, you have a certain image, and these can be obviously stereotypes. Or a computer, a gamer, for example. By participating in these activities, then, they also have a set of identity images, and people will then validate or affirm that they are this kind of person. So we choose things that give us an image to others that validates who we think we are or who we want to be. You know, um, for example, you can have, maybe someone who wishes to be an outdoor recreation person. They're maybe not quite there yet. Maybe they're not very experienced, but that's the identity that they're wanting. So they're beginning to participate in these activities because that's who they aspire to be. The next theory is the formation of relationships. This is simply that leisure is important to relationships, to interpersonal relationships. The sharing of free time and doing enjoyable activities together with others is driven by our intrinsic need for relatedness. Humans are social creatures. And shared leisure activities also helps us not only to develop or meet new relationships, but also to maintain our interpersonal relationships. So there are, three major rules of leisure in terms of relationships. First, leisure helps builds friendships, or, this could be any relationship. Leisure provides a common ground for relationship building and the development of shared meanings. It's for example, if you've been to camp, think of going to camp as a child. You're there with in 1 week, and strangers, and then at the end you take, have a picture of your cabin, and everyone is all together in a big group, and you will always remember those people, even though it was only a week long, because of the development of the shared meanings that you had and the memories. It's really through our leisure that we meet our friends. You meet a new friend in a yoga class, or at the running club. It's often through our leisure that we maintain our friendships. We have girls' night, we have parties, or basketball pickup game. For example, I've noticed at a park, I lived at a large park. There was a group of boys. They were probably 8 when I first moved there, and probably entering university when I left that house. And anyway, every Friday night they played they played flag football every single Friday. And it was interesting just to watch them grow and develop. They all sort of became different people, but they were just like the neighborhood friends. Again, maintaining their friendship through a game of, in that case, football. Recreation and leisure is also used to build intimate relationships. Leisure settings are a common place to meet intimate partners. You could meet people at work, but for example, I met my husband in leisure activity, going to a concert. And it's really then through shared leisure activity that we get to know people. That's what dating is. It's about getting to know someone. And it's often, these dates then, or the shared experiences you're having, is often based on leisure activities. You don't say, hey, you want to go out, come over and paint my house, or go to work together. You're doing something that's enjoyable. And it's then also through shared leisure that we maintain intimacy and connectedness in our intimate relationships. We use recreation and leisure to have, to keep your marriage or any form of relationship, like romantic getaways and weekends. And finally, recreation and leisure is used then for building sense of community. That's also about relationships. So it's the identification with others for a serious collective purpose, and it can create personal growth. And that growth can be about the individual person, but also the community. It helps to form a sense of community and build community. Leisure develops social capital then and a sense of connection with others. Social capital is, really the networks, resource and the networks and relationships you have with people and you have shared norms and trust and the sharing of resources for collective goals. So it's really the clubs and social groups are really formed around leisure. We often create, these small community groups in order to maintain our sense of community. And, if you look at children at a very early age will even develop these kind of little community building clubs. For example, I remember my sister when she was little at recess, she was part of the cheetah club. And I guess it was membership was girls who liked animals, I believe. But, that was a way of her maintaining friendships. We then have subjective well-being. So this subjective well-being, by definition, I'll be using the acronym SWB here, is the general evaluation of one's quality of life. It's about how happy you are, it's about your morale and your life satisfaction. So it's also about, psychological well-being. Subjective well-being then has three components. It's first a cognitive appraisal, meaning a cognitive evaluation that one's life is good. That's what life satisfaction is, generally feeling positive about life. It's also about experiencing positive levels of pleasant emotions, and while at the same time experiencing low levels of negative emotions. So theoretically, if someone has many positive emotions, but also many negative emotions, they may not have high subjective well-being. And as this relates to leisure, it is simply this. The theory saying that the greater your leisure participation in these enjoyable, pleasurable, and self-developing activities that create flow, that you will have greater subjective well-being. Now, we don't really know if it quite goes hand in hand like that, like a dose response, but we certainly can say in research that we know that people who experience positive emotions in their leisure have greater well-being. But it hasn't really been researched that well. Relationship between leisure and subjective well-being hasn't been totally proven. Even my own dissertation was looking at the effect, looking at leisure and expressive activities and the relationship to psychological, social well-being. And I didn't find anything. So, which is, that's what I really believe in, but my study did not find a significant result. So we do have small but associations, so that we can find between leisure participation and life satisfaction. but this really varies depending on age and gender, socioeconomic status, even ethnicity. Um, and what I want to emphasize is probably satisfaction is more strongly associated with well-being than quantity of leisure, meaning that we shouldn't really look at how much leisure we have, but what is the quality of our leisure. And also making sure we're at least having some pleasurable experiences, maybe not daily, but at least weekly. Then there is, these are generally theories, then they're called enhancing mood and happiness. And these theories are simply that leisure activities are good for our mood, for positive moods. That it's viewing that activities that raise arousal to our optimal level or reduce optimal level of arousal. So, we use leisure then to calm us down or to excite. And social activities that make us feel supported by others are also very important, and these can also increase mood. So, pleasurable, fun, and relaxing activities increase well being because it increases our mood. So, these theories state then that leisure activities help modulate our emotions. That means like control them. We can use leisure activities to adjust our mood. It provides a temporary adjustment. Just think of, I don't know, I mean, this is often in the movies, but people also do it. You've had a terrible day, you're frustrated, or you had a fight with your partner, and you just go for a run. I found that uh, in at Memorial, going home from work, I usually walk, and I comparing my mood when I get home after I've walked compared to when if I got picked up or took my car, I think it's drastically different. Walking home, it's an immediate adjustment to mood. Stress goes down, I process things. I also then don't bring work into the household as much. So leisure activities then that help you adjust mood also then improve functioning in other areas of life like work, home, and family. And generally, these, leisure activities will improve subjective well-being. So the theory says that for the role and impact of leisure in our mood and happiness is simply that leisure enhances positive moods and reduces negative moods. That leisure leads to a variety of outcomes that strengthen our general psychological capacity. So, psychological capacity meaning your ability to handle stress or problems. So, positive emotions endure, especially joy. And it can then spill over in some ways to other areas of life. If you have positive emotions in your leisure, it can allow you to be more resilient then and to withstand or recover more quickly from difficult conditions. It's very difficult to be coping or being resilient when you aren't experiencing positive moods. So, the role and impact of leisure is simply that positive emotions experienced in leisure carry over to other areas of our life, like work, home, and family. And that happiness from leisure is experienced in other life circumstances. It's like a spillover effect. So, and this maybe is also kind of assuming that maybe we don't have a lot of pleasure in other areas, though. In a way, this is kind of assuming that, for example, maybe you don't have pleasure in your work. The question is are there activities that are better at enhancing mood than others? Yes, there is. We know actually social activities tend to enhance mood. provide positive emotions, but that's only true for people who have a need or motive to be socially engaged. But we do know for absolutely sure that outdoor settings, that the outdoors and being in nature provides a contrast from our everyday life. And I've mentioned this before, that nature might even be viewed as an actual need. Humans have a need to be outside and in nature. But this also, especially in our today's society, it can also be novel and stimulating. It gives you some demands some initiative and interaction with the environment and provides immediate feedback. So this could be like, for example, camping for an extended period of time or gardening. So I'm going to leave that there for today. Next class, we'll continue discussing these different theories and what the theory states and what is the role and impact of leisure. I will also go through kind of some scenarios, like little case studies, and we'll discuss, what theory among all the ones we learned would best apply to the different scenarios. And these would also help with preparing for, multiple choice questions as well.